All right, 6 News Sports Director Curtis Quinn alongside Shehan Jeyarajah from CBS Sports, noted Baylor University alum. Shehan, it's been a busy year since we were here last summer. Realignment, the topic of college football for the last year, and the Big 12, the first conference affected. When you see how the conference adjusted after Texas and Oklahoma leave, what was your first reaction?
I think that they made a lot of good decisions. When you look at the brands that they bring in, I think that they clearly added the 4 most valuable brands left on the board. And when you look at how things have gone in the past couple months, their aggressiveness, I think, has really paid off in a big way. I think now they're negotiating from a position of strength. And when you look around here, right, we've seen reps from UCF, from BYU here. I think that it really speaks to how excited the members are for this new conference.
Your colleague Dennis Dodd has broken and been among the reporters breaking just about every step of conference realignment, but that includes a report that the Big 12 is in deep discussions with 4 Pac-12 schools to join the conference now that the Pac-12 is going through that turmoil that the Big 12 did last summer. You mentioned a position of strength. How much does that negotiation with those 4 schools kind of prove that point?
I think it does a lot. I mean, last year at this time, I think that any number of schools from the Big 12 would have taken a Pac-12 invite. It would have kind of been a safe ground for them in a lot of ways. But instead, I think the Big 12 will be a buyer if there is change between these 2 leagues, right? Certainly, everything's still on the table, right? I don't think that it's a guarantee that these 4 schools leave. I don't think it's a guarantee that the Big 12 wants all 4 of these schools, or even the 6 schools, including Washington and Oregon. So, but regardless, I think that these 12 teams that are part of the conference right now are in a great position to be part of it long term. And I don't think that there's really any scenario right now, short of the SEC or Big 10 getting a lot more aggressive, where the Big 12 ends up being a seller.
Brett Yormark comes in as the new Big 12 commissioner, first new commissioner in the conference in 10 years. Thoughts on his introductory press conference? Do you like what he had to say as far as what he can bring to the conference and to college sports?
I think that getting somebody from the outside world was a smart move, right? We've seen this now. This is the 3rd Power 5 commissioner out of 5 that's coming from outside of college football. The last one, George Kliavkov in the Pac-12, also came from the entertainment world. And I think having somebody who understands some of the branding and sponsorship and licensing sort of parts of this is a really smart decision. I talked to Baylor President Linda Livingstone yesterday, and one of the things that she said is she really felt strong about the quality of athletic departments and athletic directors in the conference, and they felt like they were satisfied with the level of support on the athletic side. They wanted somebody who added something new to the conference. They didn't just want another executive joining the conference. So I think right away we've heard a lot about modernizing the conference, and I think that bringing in somebody from the outside also allows you to not have to be so holy about everything in the conference. It means that you can be creative. I think that Brett Yormark had a quote yesterday where he kind of said, if you're not a disruptor, you will be disrupted. And I think that the Big 12 is going to be very aggressive in trying to market what they have, and I think they have a lot to sell.
And that includes a name, image, and likeness, which he mentioned yesterday. He's got experience in that world as well. Okay, we mentioned you're a Baylor alum. Your Bears picked atop the media poll preseason for the first time since the Big 12 started doing the preseason media poll. What do you see from Baylor, talking more along the lines of football now, that warrants that kind of expectations and warrants the expectations that the team mentioned all day yesterday that they have going into 2022?
I think that being a stable team and a stable coaching staff during these times is going to be critical, right? Dave Aranda, I think, earned a lot of points for what he did last season. You look at our preseason CBS poll of coaches, he jumped from number, I believe, 62 to 11, one of the highest jumps that we've ever seen in these rankings. So I think a lot of it is implicit trust in Dave Aranda, but from a football perspective, you have to look at the trenches, right? I mean, 4 starters coming back on the offensive line, every starter coming back, and every 2 deep member coming back on the defensive line, not to mention adding Jackson Player from Tulsa, somebody who's from the area, of course. This is going to be the best trenches in the Big 12 by a substantial margin. I think it's in the conversation for best trenches in all of college football this upcoming year. And so you kind of trust that they're going to find guys who can play receiver, find guys who can step up at cornerback, find guys who can step up at linebacker. So there's a lot to like, I think, about this team. I think that the combination of new talent that they have coming in with obviously the talent that they're bringing back puts them in a really special position.
We were both in this building when Blake Shapen set a Big 12 championship game and AT&T Stadium record, completing his first 17 passes against Oklahoma State in the Big 12 title game. To see Aranda make that hard decision to go from the guy who put you in position to get to the Big 12 championship game before an injury to the guy who won the Big 12 championship game in one of his 2 starts on the season, I mean, How is the buzz around the move to Shapen warranted from what you've heard and what you've seen of him?
Yeah, I think that there's two parts of this. One, I think it speaks so highly of Dave Aranda that Gary Bohannon, like he talked about in his press conference yesterday, is part of the reason that he is where he is today. He obviously talked about having pictures of Gary Bohannon in his house with his kids, right? So this is not a personal decision, right? This is a professional decision, and that speaks very highly, I think, of Dave Aranda, and it kind of echoes back to last offseason when they really revamped that offensive staff, despite hiring a really good staff the first year. And so the other part that I think you have to like about it too is that it's clear that they want to be more aggressive in the passing game. Last year, it was a very Abram Smith attack. It was a lot of bowling over guys. It was a lot of power runs, stuff like that. I think that we're going to see a much more renewed interest in the passing game this year. I think that they feel good about the receivers that they have, and they feel like Blake Shapen really gives them a lot more upside as a passer. We saw some of that in the Big 12 title game. We need to see him be more consistent with it. Certainly in the second half of the title game, he struggled. Part of it was because he dealt with an injury, but we need to see that first half Blake Shapen for entire games. And if that's the case, I think that, you expect the team to take a small step back on defense after losing Jalen Petrie and Terrell Bernard, but offensively, I think they have a lot of upside to keep growing in the passing game.
Of the other 7 teams in the conference, obviously Baylor picked to win the league by the media, and then Oklahoma and Texas are blue blood programs for a reason. Who of the other 7 is your dark horse to maybe win the conference regular season, maybe even that championship game?
I have been aboard the Kansas State train all offseason.
Yep.
I think that they arguably bring back the number 1 offensive player in the conference in Deuce Vaughn at running back. They arguably bring back the number 1 defensive player in the conference in Felix Eneduke-Uzoma on the defensive line. The only guy in the Power 5 who had more sacks and is coming back to school this year than Felix is Will Anderson, right? So we're talking about special players, and I think that you look at the preseason All Big 12 team, Kansas State led the way with the most selections. I really like the addition of Adrian Martinez. I think he's going to do very well in a structured type system like Chris Kleiman has. And so I think that you also look at their schedule. They get a lot of these great teams at home. They have a great chance, I think, to make the Big 12 title game. Certainly it's going to be a tough path with how many talented teams there are, but I think that Kansas State is somebody who's really going to outperform preseason expectations.
Shehan, my friend, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.